Let's talk about transitions. Transitions in academic papers primarily, but transitions are important anywhere you write. This is also known as why flow is a bad word. Students tend to talk about flow a lot. They want papers that flow. They want better flow. Students don't tend to ask, what does this mean? Students, I don't think they know. Students have no idea specifically, and they wonder, what do you do when your flow won't make your paper go? Well, if this is a question of urinary incontinence, I can't help you. But students need to, if they're writing academic papers, stop using the word flow, of course. Start using the word transition. Transitions are specific words you select. Transitions are bridges from one thought to the next. Transitions link ideas and examples to each other. Transitions are easy to understand. And transitions give your paper flow. Transitions can be transition words, specific words that we're going to examine in a few minutes, or keywords from your paper that you carry from one sentence to the next. Students need to start looking at their use of transitions. Students need to look for the connections from sentence to sentence and paragraph to paragraph. Transitions are a lot like beads on a line. The transitions themselves are those lines in between the beads. They string your ideas together. So, many students don't create ideas that are strung together easily and clearly. Instead, we're left with something that isn't connected. Sometimes, you introduce giant elements that don't seem related to the rest of your pattern. This is confusing. Transitions themselves should be those words that give your writing structure. However, another example, even though this is related to, you can still see this reaction when, in conclusion, ultimately, this is important because if this is a paper and all I'm looking at are the transitions with the main elements, the evidence, the argument, obscured, just these beads that look like they're connected in a line of transitions, at least I know the overall structure of the argument. So that is what I'm looking at, that structure of the argument right now. And that's what you need to be aware of when you look at your paper. Look for your transitions. How are things related? How do you frame your evidence and your argument for your reader? Now, there are transition words that you can use to introduce ideas. You already know these words. Words like or as, for instance, for example, such as, including, to illustrate, in particular, particularly. Transition words can add ideas. When you say also, as well, moreover, in fact, and. These are all words that you already know that play a very important role in connecting ideas. Transition words are important because they often show similarity. You can say simply, similarly, blah, blah, blah. So you can introduce an idea and connect it to another idea and show that they are similar in some way. You can just say, in the same way, this is like this. Equally or likewise. These are all good words to show similarity. Become comfortable using them. Transition words can identify things. So you can say namely, specifically, thus. Transition words clarify. You say phrases like in other words, or you say essentially. Transition words are very important for contrast. When you say but, on the other hand, in contrast, however, yet, whereas, when in fact, conversely, or still, you are showing a contrast with a previously mentioned idea. Wonderful. That's very important. Transition words emphasize. Above all, indeed, more importantly, besides. Transition words, and this is where many of you probably already use transition words, show sequence. But this is critical. Words like first, second, third, fourth, These all show a sequence of events that occurs chronologically. Order things this way. If you're going to describe an incident, you need to get your sequential transition words out and start using them. Words like, or phrases like begin by, initially, start, these all tell the reader this is the origination point. This is literally where we begin. Words like next, then, after, and before clarify relationships in between events, while and concurrently express those critical relationships that when two things have to happen at the same time or did happen at the same time. Transitions, for example, when you're making cookies, show you the critical sequence of events that has to occur. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. All these things must occur in order to get you, finally, to the point where you're taking warm cookies out of the oven. This is how our recipe works. Think about recipes as you're in your workplace, as you're writing your papers. Most of us respond very well to chronological arguments. So if you have an argument about chronology, use your transition words to let give the reader navigation tools to figure out what happened when. Don't assume that the reader is reading your mind. Transition words can also summarize. So when we finish our argument, be able to say, tell the reader why it was important, as was previously stated, thus, therefore, consequently. In summary, to summarize, overall, all in all, to make a long story short, then, given these points. These are all words and phrases you need to become comfortable using when you summarize an argument. You can conclude using other words and phrases. In conclusion is a very simple phrase that children are taught early on, but it's very effective. That's why we keep using it. As a final point, eventually, ultimately, at last, in the end, finally, these are all ways to conclude. Be aware you've just seen a lot of transition words that serve that purpose formally in English, but transitions themselves can also be keywords carried from one sentence to the next. Those keywords are usually words linked to the thesis and argument. Now, keywords also play a critical role in your topic sentences, and those should be linked to that thesis as well. But let's look at how keywords play a role in the beginning of a research paper. So here is a hook. For example, should children be sold? This is a rhetorical question that is asked not to elicit a response. You want the reader to think about this because you know the reader is probably going to respond with no. This allows you to frame your argument in the context of children as commodities, children as things being sold, and that will allow you to approach your particular topic a specific way. So if your first sentence is, should children be sold, and your next sentence is sort of an answer to that, most people would say that selling children is wrong. We've connected sold and selling here. We have created transitions within the writing without using any of our transition words. The next sentence, after most people would say that selling children is wrong, also furthers that connection. Allowing children to be sold, even into pleasant adoptive homes, makes these children into commodities and supports other human trafficking activities. So we are linking our words and carrying them forward. When we sell things, we sell commodities. And we are linking these ideas of selling children and commodities to human trafficking itself. Now let's look at what happens when we add our thesis statement. Allowing children to be sold, even into pleasant adoptive homes, makes these children into commodities and supports other human trafficking activities. 3 recent incidents in India reveal the problems that result from loose definitions related to adoption and human trafficking. Now, the words highlighted here in white are all connected, and they create a line of transitions for the reader to follow this. The words highlighted in blue, 3 recent incidents in India, allow us to focus our keywords on just these incidents, and they allow the writer to narrow the scope of the paper to not all of India and Indian adoptions, to not all adoptions in the world, not all adoptions in the U.S., not all of human trafficking, but this one problem as it is revealed in these 3 incidents. Now, this is how you approach your papers. Ask yourself, Do I have links from one sentence to the next? Have I narrowed my scope? Am I applying these words accurately? You can improve if you identify your keywords and carry them from one sentence to the next. Transitions create structure. So as you write your paper, think about your transitions, but particularly as you begin to revise. Look for those transitions and insert those transitions, because that is an easy way to raise your grade. You cannot assume that your reader is going to read your mind. You cannot simply plop evidence down and hope that your reader will have exactly the same reaction and see those connections without any guidance. Part of the job of analysis is taking things and examining them minutely and showing relationships. So part of your job as a college writer is to create those transitions that show relationships, that frame your ideas so that the reader will be more receptive and see them as logical and connected to each other. Transitions themselves create structure. They clarify relationships and they help your reader navigate your writing. And when all these things are accomplished, you will have better grades and more success in writing, whether it's an academic paper or in the work world. Thank you.